So this week in Math 160, we've been talking about fair division, right? And so an important thing that we need in order to study this is to try to figure out when some player, some person, some company gets a particular share after some assets are divided up, whether that's an estate, a farm, you know, all the property of a business, whatever. We need to know, when does a particular person think that this share is going to be something that is good enough for them to not be upset with the process, right? So there's different ways that we do this. Some we were dealing kind of with each player having some numeric, dollar amount, say, for how much they think the entire estate's worth, and we can find the share. But where we probably started was with thinking about each person has some notion that there's everything we're dividing up is worth 100%. And then each of these shares that we're breaking up our farmland, our estate, whatever into is worth a certain percentage of the whole, right? So if the entire, thing that we're breaking up in our mind is worth 100%, how much do we need to get in order to feel that we're getting a fair share if there's a certain number of other players who all have like equal rights to get a share in something that they view as fair? So if you think about this, if we have 100% is the entire value of everything, and there's two people, two players that are dividing things up, each person should be entitled to get at least, half of this 100%. And we need to hit a minimum threshold where each person feels like that the share that they're getting is worth 50% of the overall value of all the assets that they're splitting. If you happen to have three players, you do the same thing. There's 100% that we're dividing up amongst three people. So every person would feel that they're entitled to get 33.33333, you know, percent, right? So entitled to a third. Similarly, and again, 100% is the same thing as one. So this is the same thing as one third. Okay. If we happen to have four players, we just divide 100% by four, and we'd find that each player is entitled to a share that they think is worth at least 25% of the overall value of all the assets. If we happen to have five players, if there's five siblings kind of dividing up, their mother's estate or something like this, we could divide 100% by five and get 20%, right? So these would be the minimum thresholds that a person in their eyes would need to be able to get in order to feel that they're getting a fair share. So this is how it worked when we were kind of dealing with percents, but we also are seeing some problems where there's dollar amounts in the mix. And one thing to note here is if we're dividing up an estate or a farm, not every player, not every person who is, you know, dividing this up might have the same value for this. So they each have some notion of how much something is worth. And then they also have some notion of how much each individual share that might be an option that they get would be worth. So let's suppose that we're, in my mind, we have this $50,000 estate. How much would your share need to be, worth in your mind for you to feel that you're getting a fair share if there are some number of players? So if we have two players, if I'm dividing up a $50,000 piece of farmland, $50,000, business, whatever, if I'm dividing it amongst two people, you each should be entitled to get about half, right? So if we divide 50,000 by two, you would get 25,000. That divides kind of nice and cleanly. If you had three players, though, we would just take that 50,000 and divide it by three. This one doesn't kind of, come out quite as nicely. You might need a calculator for this, but it would work out if you type this into calculator, $16,666 and 67 cents if we round up. If you had four players, each player should feel like they're getting a share worth 1/4 of that, which would be $12,500. And if you happen to have five players, you just take that 50,000 and divide by five. So each player, each person that's, dividing this stuff up would be entitled to get $10,000 share. So this is the minimum threshold that this player would need to get in order to feel that they were getting a fair share. If they get more than this in their mind, that's great. But this is what's the bare minimum that they would need in order to say, yes, I got my half, third, fourth, or fifth of the value of all the assets that we're dividing.